They call it plastic money. Sleek, convenient, and always within reach. A tiny rectangle that changed how the world spends. But behind the shine is a story few ever hear. A story of power, profit, and dependency. From its glamorous debut in the 1950s, to deregulation in the 70s, to the crushing bankruptcies of the 90s and the chaos of 2008. Credit cards have shaped not just our wallets, but our culture. This is the untold story of how America got hooked, how a tool of convenience became an addiction millions still cannot escape. Imagine a miracle drug that promises freedom, power, and convenience, all packed into a small piece of plastic. That was the promise of the first credit cards. It began in 1950 with the Diners Club card. Suddenly, businessmen could sign for a steak dinner instead of paying cash. By 1958, American Express brought elegance and prestige, turning plastic into a global symbol of status. But the real revolution came in 1966, when Bank of America introduced the Bank AmeriCard, what we now call Visa. For the first time, you didn't have to pay in full. You could carry a balance, borrow tomorrow's money today. Advertisers sold it as liberation. Why wait? Live better now. But every swipe planted a seed. The promise of freedom quietly grew into dependency. The first taste was intoxicating, yet it was the beginning of an addiction that America would struggle to shake. In the 1970s, America's love affair with credit cards might have fizzled until a single court case changed everything. In 1978, the Supreme Court's Marquette decision ruled that banks could charge interest rates based on the laws of their home state, not the customers. Almost overnight, states like South Dakota and Delaware gutted their usury laws, inviting banks to set up shop with virtually no limits. What followed was a gold rush. Interest rates soared, late fees multiplied, and profits exploded. Banks discovered they could export high rates nationwide, locking millions of Americans into a cycle of revolving debt. It was the perfect business model. Like pushers on a street corner, the banks made it easy to start. Low minimum payments, easy approvals, glossy promises. But once hooked, customers found escape nearly impossible. The addiction had gone from a taste to a nationwide dependency. At first, credit cards seemed manageable. Early on, banks required customers to pay at least 5% of their balance each month. Painful, yes, but it kept debt from growing too large. Then, in the 1980s, the rules changed. Banks quietly lowered minimum payments to just 2%. It looked like generosity. Pay less now, enjoy more freedom. But it was really the perfect trap. With smaller payments, balances lingered. Interest piled up. And a new breed of customer was born, the revolver. Instead of paying off cards each month, millions carried debt from one cycle to the next. For the banks, these revolvers weren't failures. They were gold mines. Like a dealer handing out the first free sample, banks had found the hook. Once consumers got used to living on borrowed money, breaking free wasn't just difficult, it was almost impossible. By the 1980s and 90s, America was deep in its credit card high. Consumer culture was booming. Malls thrived, shopping became recreation, and plastic fueled it all. Banks sweetened the deal with rewards, airline miles, hotel points, cashback. The more you swiped, the more you earned. Marketing sealed the illusion. Commercials told us that memories were priceless, but the price was quietly added to the balance sheet. Credit cards became more than financial tools. They were symbols of freedom, sophistication, even love. For many, debt felt less like a burden and more like an upgrade. Why save when you could have it now? Vacations, electronics, designer clothes, plastic made it possible. But beneath the excitement, interest charges kept climbing. The high was exhilarating. Americans believed they were richer, freer, more modern. In reality, they were already slipping deeper into dependency. By the 1990s, the glow of easy credit began to fade. Behind the shiny ads and reward points were families drowning in $20,000, $40,000, even $80,000 of debt. What once felt like freedom had turned into a crushing weight. Bankruptcies skyrocketed, reaching record highs. Courts filled with ordinary Americans who couldn't keep up with compounding interest and mounting fees. For many, it wasn't reckless spending. It was medical bills, job loss, or simply trying to keep a household afloat on borrowed money. And yet, even after bankruptcy, the cycle didn't end. Mailboxes overflowed with fresh credit card offers, as if the system was daring people to relapse. The shame was heavy, but the temptation was relentless. Debt had become less a financial tool and more a life sentence. Breaking free wasn't just difficult. It felt nearly impossible. In the 1980s and 90s, banks gained a powerful new weapon, the FECO score. Suddenly, every consumer had a number stamped on their financial identity, a single metric predicting how likely they were to borrow, pay late, or carry a balance. Armed with this data, banks didn't just hand out cards blindly, they targeted with precision. Revolvers, the customers who carried debt, became the most valuable. Deadbeats, those who paid in full, earned rewards but generated little profit. The system learned to sort, segment, and seduce. With big data and advanced algorithms, lenders knew exactly who was vulnerable and how to keep them hooked. Interest rates, credit limits, even the design of offers were fine-tuned like a dealer adjusting the dose. The addiction wasn't accidental anymore. It was engineered, and the house always knew which players would never walk away. By the 2000s, the credit card industry had perfected the squeeze. Miss a payment by a single day? A penalty fee. Go over your limit by a few dollars? Another fee. And the harshest of all, universal default, meant if you slipped up with one lender, every other card could punish you with higher rates. Consumers were buried under a mountain of debt just as the 2008 financial crisis hit. Mortgages collapsed, jobs vanished, and millions were already stretched thin with unsecured credit card balances. The addiction had spread so far that when the economy crashed, families had no safety net. As bankruptcies soared, regulators clashed. States tried to crack down on abusive practices, while the Federal Office of the Comptroller of the Currency often sided with the banks. It was a tug-of-war between consumer protection and industry profit, one that left households caught in the wreckage. Today, credit cards are everywhere, so common we hardly notice them. Swiping, tapping, clicking online, it's all second nature. What began as a novelty in the 1950s has become the foundation of daily life. Plastic money isn't just normal, it's expected. But the question remains, can Americans ever truly quit? Most households depend on credit not just for luxuries, but for survival. Groceries, medical bills, even rent. To live without plastic now feels almost unthinkable. The paradox is stark. Credit cards were sold as freedom, yet they've bound millions to decades of payments, fees, and interest. The promise of convenience became a cycle of dependency. So, did we gain independence from cash? Or lose independence to debt? Was it progress, or just another addiction dressed up as modern life? The story of credit cards isn't finished. The next fix might already be in your wallet. Credit cards promised freedom. Freedom to buy, to travel, to live better now. But every swipe carried a cost, one that added up over decades. Today, plastic money feels essential, but the question remains: did we gain independence from cash or lose it to debt? The answer may depend not on the banks or the courts, but on us. Because in the end, the most dangerous addiction is the one we no longer see.